Welcome to the Friends of Fantasy Benefits Baseball Podcast. I am Justin Mason, lead fantasy writer and analyst at friendsoffantasybenefits.com. Joining me on this episode is Dave McDonald. Dave, how you doing, my friend?
I'm doing good, but you might hear a little bit difference in my volume. We're using my laptop. Unfortunately, my desktop kind of crapped out the other day, so we were kind of trying to work with my microphone levels, so hopefully we can get that straightened out. But it's been a good start for you and I both in our NFBC leagues. We're both contending in the top kind of three in most of our leagues right now. So let's keep it going.
Yeah, it's been a good start to the season this year, which means absolutely nothing, but it feels good, right? Like,
right.
I'm watching, my main event and my auction championship and TGFBI and waiting for the moment that I am first place overall in one of them, so I can take the screenshot and frame it and put it up on my wall. But it just feels nice to, start off quickly as opposed to start off slowly.
It's always better to get off to a fast start than a slow start. That's for sure.
Absolutely. We're going to talk about some FAAB. Yesterday was like a mini FAAB-a-palooza. It almost feels like everybody was like pent up all off season, just waiting for the season start. And some people went a little bit crazy yesterday. I didn't go particularly crazy. Did you go crazy at all yesterday during FAAB?
Not crazy, but I do tend to be more, and we'll get into this more, but I do tend to be a little bit aggressive. Definitely put in some bids on Weimer and Bay. We even won. I think we had the lowest or the second lowest winning bid on Pierce Johnson at like $45. So, we didn't bid anything like super crazy, like nothing over $70. I think there's mostly like $40, $50, $60 bids. But we did win a couple of those. So I like being aggressive early on because you're going to have these guys the whole season. So, hopefully, anyways, there's more guys available at the beginning than any other time during the year, other than maybe September call-ups. So now's the time to be aggressive if you know what you're looking for and you're making educated bids on guys.
Yeah, absolutely. Like we'll talk about FAAB and kind of FAAB strategy. We're definitely going to talk about individual players as well, but we're mostly looking at kind of an overarching strategy kind of attack, how we want to handle things early on in the season. So that way we're setting ourselves up for long-term success. Before we do that, let's just jump into some news. Luis Urias is going to miss 6 to 8 weeks with, I believe it is a hamstring or a quad pull or strain. I dropped him in all of the leagues I had him in. Which I could drop him, obviously draft and hold him. I'm kind of stuck with him on my reserve list, but I had him in 2 online championships and a main event qualifier. I dropped him. I wasn't willing to hold on to a player like that for that period of time. What are you doing with Luis Urias?
Yeah, unfortunately, same. And I do like him a lot. I think I had him as a guy who was going to take a step forward with power and everything. Like, he got really unlucky last year with his home run per fly ball rate. I think there's a certain decent amount of power in there. He had triple position eligibility, just a really great bench bat to have, and guy who I think could be a starter for you. So it sucked, but yeah, he's not, we're not talking about, Verlander or Robbie Ray or something like that. We're not talking about a guy who you really feel like you have to hold on to anytime we're talking about over a month.
Yeah. Breaking news alert, Shohei Ohtani just took George Kirby deep. For those of you now obviously listening later, recording Monday night, and that was a shot, 110 miles an hour off the bat, went 431 feet. That was an absolute, it wasn't necessarily even that bad of a pitch. Like just Ohtani being Ohtani. So
I have Ohtani in the super, and I was kind of between whether I want to play him as a starter or a hitter this week. Obviously, last week with the short week, it made sense to use him as a starter. But I had him as a pitcher, and I actually last minute switched him to being a hitter. So I will take that home run.
Yeah, that was an absolute shot, nice little 2-run bomb. And George Kirby doesn't look great as he gives up another hit to Hunter Renfroe.
He's got a great fastball, but man, those secondaries have not developed as we had hoped. So I at his ADP cost, I couldn't get on board.
Yeah, I had a hard time pulling the trigger as well. All right, Tristan McKenzie is going to be out. He's got a teres major muscle strain that is going to sideline him a month or two. It's kind of 4 to 8 weeks. It really depends on how quickly he heals. What do you know with McKenzie? Are you holding on to him? He ended up going like really, really late in some of my later drafts.
Yeah, I mean, I think he was one of those guys who was just overvalued from the beginning. I just wasn't ever in on him anywhere near where he was going. So I don't really have – I think I might have like one share of him, again, where like you, where he fell a bit. Yeah, he's – unfortunately, I don't think he's a guy I'm willing to hold either. He might be out a month, but I'm hearing more likely like 6 to 8 weeks and more likely towards the 8 weekend. So I'm not holding him. He's a drop.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you drafted him prior to the injury, is probably your SP3, and you're probably in a situation where you're being forced to kind of hold on to him for a little bit. I would probably try to hold on to him for at least another week or two if you can, and see if you can make do as long as you don't have any other major injuries. But there's somebody who has like Robbie Ray, who we're going to get to here next, and Tristan McKenzie is like their 2-3s, and now they're in some real trouble. So like I understand having to drop them, but like I have a hard time dropping my SP3 that early. If you drafted him late, if you drafted him after the injury, then if you get in trouble, you need that spot, you can probably drop him pretty easily. But this is the concern with a guy like Tristan McKenzie. He's just so slight, tall and thin, that it was hard to believe he was going to be able to stay healthy. And he was injured all throughout the minor leagues. So this isn't like a early Chris Sale type thing where everybody kept predicting injury and never happened until, he was like Chris Sale was like drafted and then like pretty much immediately got promoted to the majors. So like you said, McKenzie had that background of being injured a good amount in the minors. So that's what also scared me off with McKenzie. And there's a reason we call him Sticks. Like he is just rail thin, built like a stop sign.
Yeah.
I really like him as a pitcher. If he could turn off injuries, it'd be, I think he could be arguably an SP2, but you just can't do that with him.
Yeah, and it's definitely going to hurt my Guardians too. I mean, we are definitely missing him. Ahmed Rosario just hit one to the warning track and it got caught at the wall.
Bummer. Speaking of Robbie Ray, he is out 4 to 6 weeks with a forearm strain. Obviously, I don't know that you're probably trying to hold on to him if you can, but this has all the warning signs and red flags of Tommy John surgery, and we even had like that velocity boost that sometimes precedes these kind of Tommy John injuries that everybody's always like, oh, velocity, his velocity's up, and then this happens. I don't think you can do anything. I think you got to hold on until you have a little bit more news, but I don't think this is also going to end well. Yeah,
like I said, to you earlier, Phil and I used to discuss this stuff a lot, and I know he would be telling me, drop him, move on. It's so tough though. Like I had him as a guy I was so high on. I had him ranked very, very highly this year, and it's going to be tough. I really do want to wait. I mean, but like you said, the forearm strain, that's generally often a precursor to Tommy John, or elbow. Yeah, I don't know. It's kind of all connected, but it's probably not going to work out. Honestly, it's probably something where I should move on. I don't know if I will. I was hoping to get a little bit more information before making a decision next week, but if I wait till next week, then I'm probably going to want to wait another week after they, because he's shut down for 2 weeks. So I just don't know right now. I have to think about it. It sucks.
Yeah. Max Fried left his start on opening day with a hamstring injury. This didn't look that serious when it happened, and there was talk that he might be able to avoid the IL. They would just kind of skip his start. I think they're playing it safe with him and making sure that he's healthy. They're a team that's trying to win a World Series again, and I think they're just playing it safe. They got some depth in that rotation right now. With Schuster, though Schuster was just sent down, and Dylan Dodd, who they just brought up. So I think he's going to be fine. Where are you at on Max Fried right now?
Yeah, I'm hoping that that's the case. They are going to put him on the IL, but it sounds like it might be close to a minimum stint. Like it might be just 2 weeks. So that's what my hope is, but I hope they don't rush him back at the same time. I hope whenever they bring him back, he's good to go, ready to rock for the rest of the season.
Yeah, I'm with you. Lars Nootbaar went on the IL today with a thumb issue. He jammed his thumb. He missed the last 2 games, and he was originally just ruled out of the lineup for today, but then they put him on the IL. So he's going to miss next 12 days at least. This doesn't seem super serious or anything, but he is going to miss time. Are you worried about Lars Nootbaar?
Well, I don't know if it's just like a jammed thumb or whatever, but obviously like Jose Ramirez had a thumb injury last year that was like a torn ligament in his thumb, and he still had a good year, but you could definitely tell it greatly impacted him a lot, especially like trying to catch up to like high fastballs and stuff. He just couldn't do it. But the key here with this injury the lesson that I hope a lot of you took away is they really downplayed it. They really said like, oh, he's fine, like he'll probably be in the lineup tomorrow and all that stuff. So if you're coming up on FAAB and you're hearing stuff like that, don't take them at their word. These people will lie to you. Have a backup plan ready. If a guy has been out for multiple days and hasn't come back yet, don't just assume because they say, oh yeah, he'll probably be back the next day. Just always have a backup plan. Don't take these people at their word, because I'm assuming a number of people got screwed over by this who have Nootbaar thinking, hey, he'll be fine for next week. Like he'll be back. I don't need to pick up another outfielder to play for this week. And then this happens and it's like, okay, just don't take these people at their word is my point.
Yeah, I targeted an outfielder in FAAB in my main because that's where I have one of the places I have Nootbaar. And I made sure that all the outfielders that I targeted had a game that was starting at the same time or after St. Louis's. And so it left me with not a great outfielder necessarily. I'm starting David Peralta this week, but I've got someone in my lineup. So because I was able to make that decision.
Not a zero.
Once the lineup came out for the Dodgers or for the Cardinals, I was able to just throw Peralta in, knowing that Nootbaar wasn't there, and then he went on the IL. And it's like, okay, at least I'm gonna get some sort of stats from that position this week.
Yep.
Justin Verlander, he has the same teres major strain as Tristan McKenzie. So he is going to be out, though it's only a grade 1. So they're going to reevaluate after 2 weeks. This is not going to be a 2-week issue, I don't think.
No.
I would be really surprised if he's, back in 3 weeks. He's probably out at least a month, maybe even 2. You're not doing anything though, right?
Yeah, no, I mean, I obviously, me, I'm not drafting Verlander anywhere to begin with, but if you did, you're at this point, you're holding him. He should be, I would think he'd be back before McKenzie because he got hurt before him. But you have to keep in mind, Verlander is in his 40s. So, you heal slower the older you get. So there could easily be complications here and all that. I'm glad I stayed away, but if you drafted him, you got to stick with him.
Yeah, I'm right there with you on that. Raisel Iglesias, his shoulder issue that put him on the IL prior to the start of the season. Initially, they were saying it looked like a minimum stay. It doesn't seem like that may be the case now. What are you doing with Raisel Iglesias?
Yeah, more of the same. All these people who are like, oh, I can't believe I got Raisel Iglesias at a discount in the draft after this injury, which he's only going to miss a week or 2. It's like, no. I never bought that. I mean, shoulder injuries are not good for a pitcher, to say the least. This could easily end up being a much more serious issue than they've let on. He still hasn't thrown since then, so it's clearly not going to be a minimum stint. We don't know. He might be out another 2 weeks. He might be out another month. He might be out another month and a half. So we really just don't know at this point. But again, you have to hold him for now until you have more information.
Yeah, I mean, there's just not much you can do. I think he's a top 5 closer when he's healthy, but the fact that he hasn't started throwing yet is not a very good sign. So
correct.
My guess is he's going to be out until at least May. So if not longer.
Agreed.
Joey Bart heads to the IL with a back issue. This is looking like it might be the end of Joey Bart as fantasy relevant. Literally the morning before they put him on the IL, Zaidi, the general manager for the Giants, was on the radio talking about if he does what he did last season early on, they'll have to go out and find another option at catcher. An hour later, they signed Gary Sanchez to a minor league deal, and then a few hours later, he's placed on the IL with a back strain. Right now, Sabol is going to be, filling in when Roberto Perez isn't catching. But my guess is Gary Sanchez makes it to the major leagues here at some point because I think they prefer Sabol to be playing mostly in the outfield in general. So do you care about this situation at all at this point?
Well, yeah, because, Sabol was kind of a big catcher 2 target for me this year because I hate Joey Bart. I think he's bad. And, signing Gary Sanchez, though, complicates things, obviously. But like you said, I don't think they ever saw Sabol as, like, a primary catcher option. So I think that's fine. Sanchez will probably get the majority of that time. Like you said, Roberto Perez is there. So I'm glad for it from the perspective of having sales shares. But I think it kind of sucked for anybody who took Bart as a late catcher, too, because they did not let on that he was injured at all. And then all of a sudden the season started, they put him on the IL, and it was like, okay.
Yeah, like I said, I think this might be the end of his relevancy. We never got to see him play in this year, so at least not in the regular season. But, his MO has been, dude can hit a fastball, and he cannot hit anything else. And that's a huge problem. He needs to go down to AAA. I assume that once he is healthy, he will go down to AAA. And figure things out. And like I said, I believe Gary Sanchez is going to be up with the Giants probably sometime in the next week as Reed Detmers does not look right. He just cannot find the zone right now. So yeah, Sabol's interesting if you already have catcher eligibility in the league where you've got him. The only problem is if you pick him up, like for instance, like I picked him up in Tout, but he doesn't have catcher eligibility there. It may be a while before he gets catcher eligibility. He's gonna probably catch 2 to 3 days a week for right now. But like I said, if Gary Sanchez comes up, the catching time probably ends for him for the most part. So I would be very skeptical that he's going to pick up catcher eligibility in a lot of formats where he doesn't already have it. That being said, like he probably is going to play more in leagues where he is already catcher eligible more than the average catcher. So especially more than the average catcher too. So like I'd rather probably have him than maybe like a Nick Fortes who's only going to catch like 3 days a week or play 3 days a week.
We'll see. I don't know. Gary Sanchez, I would not put much faith in that guy doing anything. I personally, I'm holding my Fortes over Gary Sanchez.
They're starting Roberto Perez right now.
Yeah, the Guardians started Roberto Perez for a whole year, so
yeah, like they're not asking a whole lot from their catching position. And you know what Gary Sanchez does have that neither Roberto Perez or Blake Sabol have?
Power.
Well, I mean, he does have power. No, he is a hose. He is an absolute cannon for an arm. And with people running right now, I think what you need is a guy with a fucking cannon.
That's fair.
Like, I think a guy like Gary Sanchez actually may have more value to a real life organization, because of, how strong his arm is in terms of slowing down the running game. Because what we're seeing right now is everybody is running. Nobody's getting a red light right now. So
no,
if you can get a catcher who can hold guys on base because you got such a strong arm, then that adds extra value to the position.
Yeah, that's fair. I just, from a fantasy perspective, I just wouldn't expect them.
No. From a fantasy, I don't care from a fantasy perspective. Let's see. Alberto Mondesi started the year on the 60-day IL. I don't know why you put this on here other than to just laugh.
I mean, because like you heard nothing about him, and they're like, oh, they're downplaying the injury, and then all of a sudden, here we go again. The season starts, and immediately they put him on the 60-day IL, like not the 10-day, not the 30, the 60. Like, holy shit, he must be just screwed. I don't know. It's just funny to me that people still love that dude, and I'll never understand.
Yeah. I mean, I was sitting next to the Siege at Outwards in New York, and he got thrown out for auction, and Siege looked at me, he goes, "I've learned my lesson." Didn't say
oh, no way, did he?
Yeah, he's like, "I learned my lesson." I was like, wow, he only went for a few bucks.
That's a few bucks too many, but good for Siege, man. That guy,
some growth right there,
like
right?
8 years. Like every year that Mondesi has been up, Siege has been trying to draft him in the first round. Like he's just insane when it comes to Mondesi. I'll never get that, but yeah.
I mean, the funny thing is, if you were going to draft Mondesi, this was the year to do it because he's so cheap. Like,
trick question: there is not a year to draft Mondesi.
Well, in Tout Wars, you have unlimited IL spots.
I mean, yeah, but like, what's the point? Like, he's okay. I don't know.
I mean, unlimited IL spots, you just throw him on the IL. If he comes back, he's and then when he gets injured again, you throw him back on the IL. Like, it's not as big of a deal. But like, I didn't draft him either. So
no.
And Detmers just gave up more runs. Awesome. So let's see. Daniel Bard was placed on the IL at the start of the season with an anxiety issue. Good on him for getting that worked on and fixed.
Yeah.
I think a lot of times people try to just push through that kind of thing. So props to him. What are you doing from a closer's perspective in Colorado? Pierce Johnson got the first save. He went for a lot of money in FAAB this week to a number of teams around the NFBC. They have Dinelson Lamet. They've got former closer and Brad Hand. They've got Justin Lawrence. Do you think there is one guy, and who is it?
Yeah, I mean, obviously too early to say, but and you never know how long it'll take Bard to get back from this. Obviously a complex issue for him, but we're talking about closing. A guy who has anxiety issues. I don't know if that's going to be in the cards for him this year. I mean, maybe if he's completely at some point recovered from that, but if you have anxiety, the last thing you want is all that pressure at the end of the game being put on you. That's not good for anybody. And I don't know. I think, I heard a lot of people talking about, oh yeah, Bard's going to come back and get the job, and people are wasting their money on Pierce Johnson. I don't know about that. I thought Pierce Johnson was worth going after, honestly. I have concerns. Like, he definitely has to keep that walk rate down in Coors. And someone else brought up a good point and on Twitter as well. They said his best pitch is his curveball, and curveballs don't really, curve in Coors very well. So that could be a concern as well. We're talking about a rocky closer. So, I'm not putting a ton of stock in it. And if you can avoid it, okay. But, I threw a $45 bid on him in the main event, and I'm good with that. People
I don't think there's anything wrong with that.
Yeah, people were throwing $100 bids. I'm not going there. But there's a chance that Pierce Johnson keeps the role all year. I don't really think Lamet is going to close. I mean, Brad Hand does have the experience, but man, he's pretty far removed from being good and or a closer, let alone both. So I'm not really going that route either. So I think Pierce Johnson is worth looking into, and I think there's definitely a chance he keeps the job. We'll see, though.
Yeah, I don't know that he is even the guy. I think that this is probably split between him and Brad Hand, where it's a kind of a matchup play. And I also don't think Bard's going to be out for very long. A report today from their manager is that Bart is throwing already. He's throwing 96, that he looks fine, that he's trying to get back mentally. And so he may be back sooner. And I have kind of, not a motto or just, I have a rule, let's say. I don't invest in closing situations that are split on bad teams or that are muddled on bad teams. And the Rockies are a bad team. It's a bad place to pitch. I don't feel super confident that Pierce Johnson is the guy anyways. So I didn't really bid in this situation. There were other situations I'd rather dip my toes into.
Fair enough. We'll see. I don't know. I think there's a chance he could be the guy. But like you said, it was just one op. It's very possible that they go to someone else next time. We'll have to see.
If it's $40, it's $40. Like I wouldn't be worried about that nearly as much as the people who spent $250+.
Yeah, no,
which did happen in main events and online championships.
Yeah, don't do that.
Yeah, you shouldn't be spending $250 on pretty much any player, much less a guy who is a potentially closer for the Rockies. Like that just lighting some money on fire. Anthony Rendon was suspended 5 games by Major League Baseball. It was reduced down to 4 for grabbing a fan who was talking trash to him as they were walking off the field. What a moron.
Oh, my God, dude. That was, there's no excuse for that shit. What are you doing? I mean, this can't be the first time someone's talked shit to you over your professional career. Why did it get to you so much this time? Like, what was the big deal? I don't know. It was just so dumb.
Matt Williams made a meme. You know the meme of the guy walking with his girlfriend? He's looking back at another chick?
Yeah.
So he made a meme, and the girl he's looking back at is missing games due to suspension, and the girl who he's not paying attention to.
Missing games due to injury? Is that what it's going to be?
Yeah.
Yes!
And it was a fantastic meme, and I wish Matt Williams had not deleted it.
He always does that shit. He'll put something out there, and if he gets like even one person gives him negative feedback, he'll delete it immediately.
No, that was absolutely. Danielle took a screenshot and sent it to me before he deleted it. But
that is so good.
Fantastic. Like
that is hilarious.
Like, you're finally healthy. Like, why are you being a knucklehead? Obviously. You hopefully got him out of your lineup this week, but dude's just a fucking knucklehead. Like, I cannot believe that. They should have suspended him for longer. They absolutely should have suspended him.
I don't disagree. Maybe because he didn't actually like make contact with him. He grabbed him.
No, he grabbed his shirt.
Right. He grabbed him, but he didn't actually like slap him. I don't know. Maybe if he slapped him, they would have given him longer. I don't know. It seemed short to me too, but I don't know.
Yeah, he should have been suspended at least a week. And honestly, probably should have been suspended a lot more than that. You can't be putting your hands on people, especially fans.
No,
definitely not. It's one thing to put your hands on another player during like some sort of altercation or benches clearing thing. It's another thing to put your hands on like just random dude who paid a ticket, paid $5 to be at the Oakland Coliseum.
He's already an Oakland fan. Like he's already suffering so much. Why do you need to add to that? Let him get his frustration out.
Absolutely. Last piece of news: Anthony Desclafani started today, and Sean Manaea was the follower. Desclafani ends up going like 5 or 6 innings. Just because he was pitching so well. I don't think that was initially the plan. I think he was probably only supposed to throw 3 or 4 innings, but he was just cruising through the White Sox lineup, just pitching so well that they just kept him in there. Do you have concerns about Manaea now? And are you interested in picking up Desclafani?
Yeah, actually, I drafted Desclafani in a couple of places and picked him up where I could. Yeah, I like Desclafani a lot. I think he's better than Manaea. Manaea just can't. He can't maintain the velocity through a game. He's so wishy-washy from start to start. I threw this on there though because I want to get your opinion as a Giants fan. Like, did you know about this? Because this is kind of a shock to everybody. Like, we thought Manaea was in the rotation, but they never made any kind of ruling on Desclafani. And I think that's kind of the lesson here for the future if you don't see someone get sent down, like people just assumed that Desclafani was the SP6, but they never said that. They never said like, okay, Manaea's in the rotation and Desclafani's going down to the minors or the bullpen or whatever. And then all of a sudden, Desclafani made the rotation, and he's a solid starter, I think. So, did you know about this? Did you see this happening?
This kind of came out of nowhere.
Yeah,
I think what really happened was like there was probably an open competition for that 5th spot between Manaea and Desclafani.
Okay.
But Manaea looked so good and had the added velocity in spring where people just assumed he was getting it.
That makes sense.
You know, and for good reason. Like, even though Desclafani didn't have a bad spring, like, I mean, didn't he like shut out the United States squad like earlier on, like when they were still, you know, before the WBC actually started. I think people just got so hyped on Manaea they kind of forgot about Desclafani. And to your point, Desclafani's always been good when he's been healthy. Yep. When he's been bad, is when he's injured. He's healthy right now. And he's kind of a sneaky pickup, you know, in leagues, because I think he probably will keep that spot. You know, like he, unlike some of the other Giants guys like Cobb and Stripling and Alex Wood, he doesn't rely on ground balls to get outs. He gets strikeouts and fly balls, and in that park, that's a good place to be kind of a fly ball pitcher. I think that Desclafani is actually a pretty interesting pickup this week.
I think so too. I actually ended up taking him with my very last pick in the super draft, round 30. So he was still out there, and I said, look, I don't know what's going on with him. He's probably not in the rotation, but just in case he is, I'm going to pick him up and see what happens. And sure enough, ended up being a pretty clutch pickup. He's got a second start coming this week too. So, you know, great 2-start this week. So I would, if you guys are listening and you guys playing like even like Fantrax 12s and OCs and stuff, I would go pick Desclafani up where you can.
Yeah, I would too, actually. All right, that's going to wrap up the news. We're going to move on into kind of our, you know, main topic, which is really kind of discussing how we approach FAAB in the early season. This has been kind of a ever-evolving thing for me. I would say it is one of the weaker parts of my game is FAAB, and I learned a lot, honestly, by getting my butt kicked by Scott Genstead last year. You know, and I feel like every season I'm getting better and better at it, and I'm hoping to kind of hone it in a little bit better this year. But I wanted to get your thoughts and obviously chip in my own thoughts. How aggressive are you in early FAAB? Like, are you the type of person that like says, hey, I get these guys for 6 months, I'm hoping I'm going to hit on one of these guys, I'm going to get aggressive? Or do you tend to be a little bit less aggressive early? Because I'm kind of a mix between the two.
Yeah, I kind of alluded to this earlier when we were talking before we got into the news. But yeah, I am pretty aggressive early on. Like, there's been most years I've hit on a guy in the first week or two, you know, that I've ended up keeping on my roster for, you know, a vast majority or all of the season. And, you know, those guys can end up being a huge – it's basically like getting another draft pick, you know, like sometimes things – you know, you're drafting spec closers or, you know, guys have gotten injured since you drafted them or whatever, and then you find out, okay, this guy's not closing or whatever, and, you know, you've got extra spots on your roster and you're looking for who can make an impact on my team right now and what do I need. It's hard to know what you need the first week, but there's all of these opportunities out there week one. Like, you're not going to have as many players available later, like in you know, May and June, than you will right now, because right now there's a bunch of guys who, if we had more information before the draft, we probably would have drafted them, but we didn't, so we didn't draft them. And so it's kind of, before it corrects itself, you want to make sure you get as many of those guys as you can. And so, like, we didn't know that Bay was going to be the starter at second base for the Pirates. Now we know. He was a guy who I actually liked and I was looking at, but didn't really see anything about him starting. So I kind of just went out of my mind. So then once I saw, okay, he is starting and he's running, and this guy can steal 30 bases easily, especially this year. So yeah, like, I'm looking at, where do I need guys? What did I come out of my draft? Where do I have holes, and what can I fill right away? I would rather spend a lot of money early and then adjust my FAAB, you know, approach for later more than save money until, the middle of the season, because those guys aren't making as big of an impact for you by that point. And there's less guys out there. So I'm definitely on the more aggressive end, but I'm not just throwing money at guys to throw money at guys. And I'm not going to be aggressive with like streamers. Like if I picked up Zach Plesac, which God help me, I did in a couple of places, and he just got booty pounded tonight. But it was like a $6 bid. It was nothing much. Like I'm not throwing money out just to throw money out. I'm putting bids on guys who I think are up to stay. Your Bay, your Weimer. I mentioned a $45 bid on Pierce Johnson. Like anybody who I think could potentially make a pretty good impact on my team this year, those are the guys that I want to be aggressive on.
Yeah, so I have changed what kind of fabber, I guess is maybe the term for it. What type of fabber I've been each year, because I used to be the person that I would not spend very much early on. Unless I was filling an injury, I wasn't picking people up. I was kind of staying true to my thoughts in terms of like, hey, I've done all this research. I'm not going to change my opinions unless like something huge or actual comes up, right? And so I'm going to save my money. And then the 2020 season happened, and it forced me to get really aggressive because we only had a 60-game season, and I learned a lot from that. And so the last few years since 2020, I've kind of done what you've done, which is being really, really aggressive early on. The only problem is what has ended up happening in 2021 and 2022 for me was I got a little bit too aggressive too early, and especially with large bids. And so what I'm trying to do, and kind of what I alluded to in terms of with playing against Scott Genstad in both of those main event leagues last year, he was aggressive early, but he wasn't aggressive with big bids early. And so he was aggressive in terms of, dropping guys and turning over the back end of his roster and picking up guys. But he wasn't like spending $50, $100 a pop and getting to the point where he didn't have money later on. What he was doing is spending $5 here, $7 here, $20 here. And then he landed on the John Birdies. He landed on the Jake McCarthys. He landed on those guys that really helped his team. And that's what I'm trying to do. So I want to be aggressive, but I don't want to overspend, because I want to be in a position where when July and August come around and I really know like where my deficits are, that I have the money to go out and kind of address those issues, as opposed to being the situation where I was last year, which was I had a pretty good team in that Vegas main with Scott. I was leading, pretty much at the beginning of July. My pitching fell apart and I ran out of money in order to kind of really address it. And it ended up falling off and not being competitive at the end. So I'm trying to be a little bit more targeted with my aggressiveness, is I guess what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, I would always rather have $25 bullets than $100 bullet. And that's the thing that, like what you were saying with Scott, that's some of my best pickups over the years have been like those couple dollars that I've thrown on guys. One of my biggest regrets last year was I was all over McCarthy from the beginning of the season, and I knew it was only a matter of time before he would get full playing time. And I could see it happening. I could see him getting like a slight increase, and I'm like, okay, it's probably about to happen. And then I remembered, like, when I was doing FAAB, I was like, well, I could probably just pick up McCarthy for like a couple bucks this week just to stash him now. And then I was like, I'll wait another week. And sure enough, the next week he got full playing time, and then you had to pay $100 for him or whatever, and that was crushing. So yeah, you want to use those couple dollar pickups as much as you can and be aggressive with them. Don't wait until it's the situation is absolutely perfect. Like, okay, he's playing full time now. Now's the time to jump in. You're probably a week late at that point. That's what you really want to be looking for, those kinds of opportunities to spend, like you were saying, those $5 bids and whatnot. Even like the $10, $20 bids, stuff like that, when you can potentially add an impact player.
Ooh, Wow. Sorry. Corbin Carroll just hit a bomb off of Brent Honeywell. And then Nick Ahmed had a rocket shot that Oscar just made a pretty sweet catch on in the outfield. So, I'm right there with you. Let's talk about kind of some of the categories or things that we're targeting early in FAAB. Do you jump on guys to get early saves? We had AJ Puck, who went for a lot of money in the leagues where he wasn't drafted. Luckily for me, I drafted him in my main, so I've already got him. Reynaldo Lopez, Brusdar Graterol, Aroldis Chapman has been throwing 103 and looks really, really good. Dany Jimenez got an early save in Oakland. Will Smith got the first save for Texas. Andrew Chafin, and then we already talked about Pierce Johnson. Like, how do you approach when a guy that we weren't necessarily expecting to get a save gets an early save? Are you usually aggressive on those guys?
Yeah, it just depends on the situation. So I'm trying to draft a lot of spec closers. Like, especially if I don't address closer early in the draft, I want to be taking, 4 or 5 shots on guys because I think I have a pretty good idea of who's going to end up with the job. And of course, we'll be wrong sometimes, but guys that I targeted this year were Michael Fulmer, Will Smith, guys like that. So I'm looking for a clear path to being the sole closer. And Will Smith is that guy for me. Like, I put out a tweet a while ago about him. Like, this is his former manager that he used to close for. That means something. Leclerc is in no way, shape, or form entrenched as a closer. He does have closer experience, but not with Bochy. This is Bochy, right? He's there, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Bochy has experience with Will Smith as his closer. So, and Will Smith had a dominant spring. It just made sense. Like, why wouldn't they use Will Smith as a closer? So, I honestly should have gotten him more than I did. But I didn't have to FAAB him anywhere because he wasn't available by that point. But that's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for a clear path to being the sole closer. And a lot of these guys aren't. Chafin would be, at best, he'll share the job with McGuff, and I think McGuff eventually just takes it over completely. But even if he doesn't, Chafin will just be like the guy that they bring in to face lefties. I don't think he's really worth going for. Dany Jimenez, he's not a good pitcher. Oakland's not a good team. And I feel like they paid Trevor May $7 million for the sole purpose of building up his value and then trading him for prospects at the deadline. This is what they do every year. I just can't imagine that that's not still the plan. Even if they're not going to give him saves right off the bat, I still think May is eventually going to become the closer unless he just sucks. So I'm really not interested in Jimenez. Aroldis Chapman is interesting. Obviously, they do have Scott Barlow there, but they're not really beholden to Barlow. Like, they could easily go to Chapman. I think they're both free agents next year. Is that correct? Do you know?
No, I think Barlow is still under. Chapman definitely is. Chapman signed a 1-year deal.
Yeah,
but I believe I'll double check, but I believe that Barlow is still.
Maybe Barlow has one more year after that. I think he's a free agent, either 24 or 25. I can't remember which, but either way, they could end up.
Yeah, he's a free agent in 2025, so he's got another year after this.
Okay. So it's possible that they build up Chapman's trade value and then trade him. He has legit closer experience. If he's back to being, throwing 103 and being dominant and throwing strikes, it's hard to see them going away from that as their closer. So we'll see. I think Chapman's worth going after. Brusdar Graterol is interesting. He has the stuff to close, but he also doesn't get strikeouts very much. So I didn't really think of him as a closer type, but they named him. They said, him and Hudson are pretty much the guys they're looking at mainly in that bullpen. My whole thing is that whoever ends up, if they have a sole closer in LA, and it doesn't mean that they will, but if there is a sole closer, the upside is massive there. So for me, he was worth taking a shot on because of that upside, even if I'm less sure of him compared to some of the other guys on this list. Reynaldo, he got the first save, but he's had 2 appearances and he's given up runs in both of them. So I don't know. I don't know what they're going to do there. I'm not counting on. We kind of talked about this off air. I'm not counting on Liam Hendriks coming back and getting saves really at any point this year, but definitely not anytime soon. I do hope he makes a recovery and everything and comes back. I think that'd be a really cool story. I just can't see him coming back and being an effective reliever / closer at this point. Pierce Johnson, we talked about earlier. I think he's worth speculating on, but not going overboard for. And then AJ Puck, like you said, he was drafted in most leagues, so he wasn't really available to FAAB anywhere. I think they're a little hesitant to use him a lot. Like, I don't think they want to use him back-to-back days very often. Certainly not 3 days in a row. I do think it's kind of going to end up being a messy situation with Floro there, and maybe some others enter the picture too. I'm not super into Puck, but if you can get him, if you can get him for $50-$60, I think that's probably a worthwhile bid, but he'd go for far more than that.
Yeah, I mean, like I said before, like in these situations where there's either a muddied situation, especially on a bad team, I tend to try not to invest too much. For instance, like I picked up Will Smith. I spent $50 on him in the main event, and I dropped Aroldis Chapman. Like I knew Aroldis Chapman looked good and stuff like that, but like I don't know that Chapman's the guy. Barlow's got a pretty good track record there in Kansas City. And either way, it's a bad team. Like how many saves are really going to be available, especially if they end up splitting it between the two. That may end up being a mistake. Graterol is one of those guys where, yeah, I mean, the stuff looks good, but like you said, he doesn't get a lot of swings and misses. He ends up giving up a lot of contact. The defense behind him isn't as good as it was a year ago, especially on the infield. And honestly, I think once Daniel Hudson is healthy, he may end up being the guy. He's got closer experience. They seem to really like him in Los Angeles. So, Dany Jimenez, I got an early save from him because I drafted him in the main event. AJ Puck, I drafted him in the main event, got an early save. But like Puck, I really like as a guy who I think could be the dude because he is. He's got really, really good skills. Jimenez does not have very good skills. I just think he might end up getting, a lion's share of a split job. But he split that job in Oakland last year, and he led the team with 11 saves. Like, how much does that move the needle? Like, how much FAAB do you really want to throw at like 12 or 13 saves because it's such a bad team? Stay away from those like really bad team situations. Like, they're just not profitable enough, especially if they ended up getting shared. So, what about streaming starting pitching early on? I tend to be a little bit more conservative with my streaming early on just because I don't want to put myself in a hole in the ratio categories. Are you more aggressive early on, trying to kind of rack up those wins and strikeouts and kind of figure out the ratios later, or are you like me?
No, I mean, definitely I'm not trying to stream. I try to draft to not stream. I mean, obviously you're going to end up streaming, but, my goal this year was to start with hitters and then build like a huge pitcher base where, I want to have my SP6 still be really good. Like I didn't want to go into the season with needing to stream pitching much. I would much rather stream a hitting slot or two because there's always guys that I can throw in and they're not going to hurt me the way that pitcher streams do because they can just tank your ratios. As we've seen today, from Zach Plesac, Cutter Crawford, Drew Smiley, several other guys blew up ratios too, but those are three of the guys that I have. I'm aggressive in the manner that I'm looking for guys who maybe you can get at a streaming pitcher's cost, but who could potentially stick around and be worth holding on to beyond that. So I'm looking for guys like we mentioned before, Desclafani. If you could get him, he's a guy who you might end up holding on to long term. So that's what I'm trying to be aggressive on, is finding those starters who are going to stick. So like in Glarf, when David Peterson was not going to make the rotation, he went undrafted in our draft because we drafted early March or whatever. And so I ended up putting in a pretty aggressive bid on David Peterson week one, for like $120 because he's a guy who I expect to have for the whole season. And I think he's a good pitcher, good strikeout rates on a good team with a good offense behind him. So I'm aggressive in the sense that I'm looking for those starters who can be more than streamers, But for the strictly streamers, no, I want to do that as little as possible.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. There's certain guys that are interesting, like Tyler McGill went for a lot of money this week. Mike Clevenger had a really good start on Sunday, and so he went for a lot of money in leagues where he was still available. I want to feel pretty good that if I am picking up a streamer, that I can use them for at least a few weeks early on, right? I don't want to be like churning over those guys necessarily week to week, especially early on if I'm spending a lot of money on them. I don't trust Clevenger. I don't trust Tyler McGill. I think neither of them have looked quite right, though. Like I said, Clevenger did look better, and McGill looked better in his first start than he had previously. But I wasn't willing to spend the kind of money that they were going for in FAAB.
What did Clevenger go for? And is this in a 15 or a 12?
I can look it up.
Or you can just give me an approximation. Like, was he like 100 or something?
Yeah, he was going for 80, 90, $100 in a lot of.
I do like Clevenger. It would be tough to drop that kind of dough on him. I don't trust Tyler McGill at all.
Yeah.
Last year I loved him. The velo was up, but of course, like you mentioned, velo increase often leads to injury, and it did. And he hasn't looked like himself, and he didn't look good at all in spring. He walked a ton of guys, wasn't getting a lot of strikeouts, and I don't have very much faith in McGill at this point. But Clevenger, I am interested in. I would have probably spent $80 or so on Clevenger, but probably not.
So Clevenger only was picked up in one main, so I'm assuming he was drafted. Yeah. And the rest of them went for $69 in the online championship. He was picked up in a bunch of leagues, and a lot of them he went for triple digits. 231 was the most. Though there were a few leagues where he went for $4, $5, $6, things like that. So, in a place where you get him for $4 or $5, that's totally fine.
Yeah.
Even
$50
spend $20, $30.
Fine, but several $100s. No, not especially in a 12. Like, what are we doing here? In a 12, you're going to go $300? Like, no, come on.
You can't spend that much in a 12 on one guy. You're supposed to be churning constantly. In the back half of that team, like, you just can't be spending that kind of money.
Right.
What about how are you adjusting to like the stolen base uptick? Through the first 4 games of the season, there were 70 stolen bases this year, and last year through 4 games there was just 29, with pretty much virtually the exact same success rate. So teams are just stealing more and being more aggressive. Now, part of that is individual teams being more aggressive. The Orioles stole 10 of the 70 bases through the first 4 games, and 7 of those 10 and 7 of the 70 were just Cedric Mullins and Jorge Mateo. Yeah. How are you adjusting? Because if we do end up having, let's say, close to double the amount of stolen bases, you go from like needing 90 something stolen bases to needing 160, 170 to win the category. While everybody will obviously getting more from what they drafted, you're gonna need more.
Right. Yeah. And what's crazy? I think today Tony on his solo main event team, he got his first stolen base of the year today, and I was just like,
yeah.
How the hell do you not have any stolen bases before that? Like, I'm getting stolen bases from guys
about this. Yeah, you and I were talking about this before. Like, I've got one team, my main event team has 9 stolen bases. My Barf League team has 3 stolen bases. Like, it's because they're coming in bunches. It's not like everybody is stealing more necessarily, but some guys are stealing a lot more.
True. To answer your question right now, I'm not changing anything. All I'm doing is keeping an eye on my own situation to make sure, that I'm staying within, reasonable, distance of the rest of the league, making sure that I'm not falling behind there or anything. But I don't know what else you can do. We have to give this a couple of weeks to see, what do we have, you were mentioning that Rosario and Jimenez haven't gotten you any steals yet. I expect them to run. Like it's probably going to happen. Let's give it a week, see how we look, maybe 2 weeks. But really, it's just keep an eye on the wire and see who your options are and see if that fits in your team. But just don't let guys go. But I do think that there's going to be a lot of options this year. Unlike any other year where steals are kind of really hard to come by and there's a lot of competition for those steals because they're such a rare resource in most years. This year, I don't know that it's going to be that rare. I think it's going to be one of the easier things to find on the wire. I was more concerned about making sure I had enough power than making sure that I had enough speed. So we'll see. I think it's just you got to keep an eye on it. Don't let it get too far out of control. If you start falling way behind, you gotta figure something out. You gotta target someone who can give you some speed.
One of the things like I noticed was that when I was recording with Paul earlier today, coming in today, those 70 stolen bases were divided among 41 players, and only about 5 or 6 of those players were guys that were going to be readily available even in 12-team leagues. And so I don't know that it's going to be as easy to find like bulk stolen bases that don't kill you in other categories off of the wire. I mean, this is, kind of the discussion we've had with power, right, in the last few years, which is like people say, oh, power is readily available, but it's usually power that kills you somewhere else, right? It kills you in batting average, or it comes with 0 speed. And so I hope that people built their teams balanced enough to sustain this, because, one of the things I really wanted to focus on was guys that were giving me good batting average. And so that way, if I needed to go to the wire for a guy that was, kind of empty power, empty speed, I already had that batting average built up to kind of sustain maybe a 230 hitter. Hey, it's a 230 hitter, but he runs, or 230 hitter, but he hits for power. My teams can sustain that because I built up such a good batting average base. So you just got to be careful. Some of these guys you're going to get off the wire. I mean, there will be, G1 Bay I actually really, really like as a pickup because I think he can hit for average as well as steal a lot of bases. But a lot of these other guys are going to be like, they're going to be the Jorge Mateo types where, hey, they might get you a bunch of steals to help you catch up, but they also might hit like 210.
Right. Yeah, and that was a big reason why I targeted Bay, because I felt like he was actually probably closer to like a Steven Kwan type than a Jorge Mateo type, where I can get some decent average out of him as well. Yeah, we will see. That's interesting that you said that there weren't a lot of guys out there who have stolen a lot of bases, but we're also only like 4 days in or whatever it is.
We're on day 5, so it's so hard to know. And I think this will also like right now we're at a really big pace where like every team or a lot of teams are really pushing it on the base paths. Pitchers and catchers are going to figure some of this out too. Like this is not going to be, I think, as big of. The Dodgers are just going off on the Rockies right now.
Are they?
They were down. Yeah, they were down 4-2 coming in the inning. They're now up 9-4. So Jason Hayward just hit a 2-run shot. Telling you kind of pitching the Rockies are thrown out there.
Wow, even Chris Taylor homered. Things are bad for the Rockies.
Yeah, it's James Outman had like a 3-run double, or a 2-run double. So it's going bad right now for the Rockies pitching. But I mean, I think one of the things you just want to just be careful of is that like you don't hurt yourself with some of these guys. But like I was starting to allude to before I got distracted by Jason Hayward hitting a home run, is like we're still so early in the season where teams are still kind of trying to figure out how to attack this, how to defend this, right? Like, and I think pitchers and catchers are going to start figuring out better ways to kind of
defend against the steals. Yeah,
prevent guys from just running wild. I mean, obviously, some of the stuff is just going to happen. There are going to be a lot more stolen bases this year, but it may not be at the current pace that we've seen through these first 4 or 5 games.
Yeah, I agree. There's probably going to be an adjustment period coming at some point, but I don't think anybody really knows what that looks like. And I think it's just one of those things you just have to keep an eye on and make sure that and the other piece of advice I'll give you is this: even if you don't think you need more steals, if a guy comes onto the wire who you think like, oh, this guy actually isn't just like you're saying empty steals or shitty speed, as I call it, like the guys who pretty much shouldn't be playing baseball other than the fact that they steal bases, because those are really difficult to have faith that they stay in your lineup. That's why I try to get my steals through a whole bunch of guys throughout the draft. I really don't want to just have that like one steals only guy. I want to have 7 or 8 guys who can give me 10 to 20 steals each, and then just hope a couple of them outperform what I'm hoping for, that I'm expecting from them. But just keep an eye on the wire. If you see a guy like G1 Bay, who's actually a solid contact hitter who can also run, make a bid on him. Even if you don't necessarily need the speed right now, don't go overboard, but put a solid bid on him. Put a $40, $45 bid on him or whatever. And if you get him, then you've got a little built-in backup plan there in case you do need speed at any point during the season. So just always be looking at what's available on the wire, and even if it's not something that you need, it could be something that you could use. So just keep that in mind.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I picked up Bay in a couple leagues for like $25, $30. I picked up Bryce Terang in a few leagues, especially the leagues where I lost Urias for like $25, $30. I think like these are guys that you can get for an affordable price that could be big difference makers down the stretch. How aggressive do you get on guys that have like hot starts or called up? Like these are like the Mitch Garvers of the world. Trace Thompson had 3 home runs yesterday, like in insanity. James Outman's been good. Luis Montero's been playing a lot. Joey Weimer just called up. Joey Gallo's figured out how to hit home runs again. Like the Nolan Gormans, Patrick Wisdoms, of the world. Like how aggressive do you get on the guys? Adam Duvall is another one. How aggressive do you get on these guys that are starting out hot or just getting called up right now?
Yeah, I mean, it depends on their metrics. You don't want to just look at the surface results. You don't want to just look at the home runs. You want to see, what's their strikeout rate? Are they, especially when you're talking about prospects, you want to be careful. Anybody who strikes out like 30% or even close to 30% in the minors is probably going to be striking out, another 5 to 8% higher in the majors sometimes. So, that doesn't translate well. You want to make sure you're getting guys who are going to be able to make solid contact. I'll be honest with you. I did pick up Weimer in a few leagues, but I'm certainly concerned. He supposedly got a lot better and made adjustments in the Arizona Fall League and whatnot. But in AA, he struck out a lot. So he moved to AAA, he struck out less, and then, like I said, Fall League was good. But I don't know. He could be a guy who doesn't make enough contact to stick, honestly. So I wasn't willing to go super high on him, but he also steals bases in addition to giving you power. So I thought that the potential upside outweighed the risk at a good price, like $50, $60. Some of these guys we kind of know what they are. Trace Thompson is a guy who I have no interest in. He's not playing. He's played like 2 out of 4 or 5 games so far. So, I don't think he's going to play enough to really be worth considering. Patrick Wisdom, same thing. We know that these guys have power. They're gonna hit some bombs occasionally, but it's just a big game. So, Mitch Garver, are you gonna? You're probably not gonna pick him up to play him at utility because he's only going to play, maybe 2, like half the games, maybe. Which as a catcher would be nice, but how long is it going to be before he gets catcher eligibility? He's at 1 right now. So, we could be talking about
a few weeks before he gets catcher eligibility.
I mean, a few. It could be like 6 weeks before he gets catcher eligibility. So, it could be quite a while. And, I'm probably not, willing to hold him and wait on that. So, James Outman was the guy I drafted a bunch. He does have a higher strikeout rate, but I thought, again, that his upside made it worthwhile as a late pick in several drafts that I got him. He's looking good so far. He's playing. I think he started 3 out of 4 games or 4 out of 5 or whatever it is right now. Joey Gallo's interesting because I was completely out on him, but there's been talk that he's but I mean, I feel like there's always talk that he's revamped things and he's going to change and be better now. So I'm definitely not putting a lot of faith in it, but I did pick him up in a big league for about $25. So I was like, I'll take a shot, see how he looks. I'm not overly investing in any of these situations, but Nolan Gorman, I put a $135 bid on, and I didn't even come up to the halfway point of the winning bid, which is like 315 or something like that. So I'm not willing to go that high. I mean, Gorman's still probably just a platoon guy. I don't think they're going to play him against lefties, so I think his power makes him worthwhile. But a lot of these guys are just power, with no average. So I'm not going wild on any of these guys, but I am interested to a degree where I do need power in some places.
Yeah, I mean, some of these guys are interesting. To me, it's interesting when you have like really good underlying skills. So like what you were kind of alluding to, like, a guy like Nolan Gorman, your former top prospect. One of his issues last year was he chased a lot. Well, so far this year, he's done a really good job of not chasing. He's actually become a lot more patient at the plate, and it's paying off dividends. The problem is going to be pitchers will adjust, right? Like, and when they start realizing he's not swinging outside of the zone and not being super aggressive in the zone, they're going to start attacking in the zone, and they just haven't started to do that yet. And will he be able to adjust back? Will he get more aggressive in the zone when that happens? It remains to be seen. The problem for a guy like Nolan Gorman is that Cardinals team is stacked. Part of the reason why he was playing so much is because Lars Nootbaar was injured and still on the roster. Now, Nootbaar is down to the minor leagues. Juan Yepez is back up. Will Gorman continue to play every day against right-handed pitching? I don't know if that's the case. They like Alec Burleson there. Jordan Walker's up. Dylan Carlson needs to find, playing time to, give them a reason to keep him up on the roster. So, like, I don't know that, especially because he's probably not going to play against lefties. Like, I think the ceiling is pretty capped on a Nolan Gorman right now. Joey Gallo is still Joey Gallo. Yes, there have been minor improvements. He's gone from being like a 73% zone contact guy, which is like one of the worst in the league, to 78%, which is still well below league average. Maybe he makes that work, but I'm not buying a guy like Joey Gallo. I do like Outman, just like you. He was the guy that I was targeting, especially really early in draft season and drafting holds, because you were able to get him so effing late, and he has looked pretty good. He's getting regular playing time. I think my favorite of this list is probably Kike Hernandez, because I know his role is safe in Boston. He's going to pick up that shortstop eligibility here at some point. Joey Weimer is a really, really interesting guy because he's got a lot of power. He's got a lot of speed, but man, he swings and misses. And I know, like you mentioned, like people talked about, he made, improvements at Arizona Fall League. Arizona Fall League has like AA, single A pitching. Like they send the worst pitchers, in the minor leagues to the Arizona Fall League. Like they don't send good pitchers there. Like it's very rare to even see like AAA guys or guys who were top, 100, top 200 prospects on the pitching side that gets in there. It's really a finishing school for hitters. So like I'm not taking a lot of his improvements at the Arizona Fall League with a lot of salt.
Yeah, that's fair. I was saying, like, I have no idea how much to put on that. I know
you shouldn't put
AAA.
I mean, it's good to see a guy do well. Like, I mean, I don't care what level of competition, you've got. It's always nice to see a guy do well. But I mean, Arizona Fall League pitching isn't good at all. So, what kind of stats do you look at when you're trying to figure out if there is legit still skill growth, and if a guy's worth picking up kind of in the short term or whether it's just like a hot streak? Let's start with pitchers here.
Yeah, and it can be really difficult to figure this out because you're looking at a guy playing well and you're like, okay, this could kind of confirm a prior bias either way. You know, you could be like, okay, I thought this guy was going to be good and he's doing well, or the other way around. I thought he was going to be bad and he's doing poorly to start. And oftentimes it could come down to just being a hot or a slow or a cold start. And, you know, you got to really look at the underlying, you know, skills there. For pitchers, one thing that I'm doing this year that I haven't in the past is, because I've heard a great way to figure out how good a pitcher's stuff is. Like, let's say a guy gets called up, you know, Johnny Brito, something like that. Look at his stuff plus ratings and see, you know, are his pitches good? You know, and you know, another way I figure this out is every day I read, you know, Nick Pollock's Pitcher List SP Roundup, and read his take on it, because, you know, he knows far more about pitching than I can ever know. And you know, I see what I see when I watch pitchers, but I don't have an educated eye on Nick's level. So I really appreciate his breakdowns and you know, trying to see, okay, is this a guy that he sees going forward as a potential fantasy option, or is this just a good start that, you know, was more or less just luck or something like that? So, you know, stuff plus is a good way to figure out, are there, you know, some good pitches here? Does he have good stuff? Velocity obviously is a big thing, you know, especially with your fastball. You know, are you throwing, you know, different pitches have different benchmarks, but generally I'm looking, are you throwing like, you know, 95 plus? Are you throwing 97 plus? Are you throwing, you know, if you're throwing 91, 92, your margin for error is going to be a lot lower. So velocity certainly plays a big part there. K percentage, walk percentage, obviously big deals. You know, I need to know, is this guy striking people out? And is he, you know, not inducing a whole lot of walks? Because, you know, like Jack Flaherty, he had like a no-hitter or whatever, one hitter, I can't remember what it was, but he had like 8 walks or whatever. You know, that does not interest me. Like, that does not tell me that I want to target him for his next start. That tells me he's in a void for right now. And then, like, the biggest indicator for me is their SIERA, because that really tells you how they're pitching in the current season. So, you know, if someone has a 2.5 ERA, but their SIERA is like 4.5, I'm pretty skeptical that they're going to be able to continue pitching well. Now, there are exceptions. We've seen Julio Urias now outpitch his underlying projected statistics like SIERA for years now. I'm not concerned that Urias is going to – I think he's a good pitcher. I think whatever he does that doesn't translate for those projection systems, it's viable. Whatever it is, it works. I'm not concerned about him, you know, not being a good pitcher. But for the majority of guys, SIERA is a very telling stat. I'm looking at swing strike rate and hard contact on individual pitches. I'm looking at, okay, this guy has 3 pitches. I want to see what's the swing strike rate and what's the hard contact rate on each one. And the good thing is on Pitcher List, they actually give you the benchmark. So they tell you not just what their stats are, but how they compare to other starters' pitches, other starters' same pitches. So like fastballs, you're comparing what's his swing strike rate on his fastball compared to the MLB average amongst starters with fastballs. So that's another thing that I like to look at to see, okay, is he average? Is it a bad fastball? Is it a really good fastball? And I definitely love to see a good fastball. That's pretty important for me, but it's not the only thing. You know, we've seen Shane Bieber, bad fastball, but 2 ridiculously good secondaries and he can locate that fastball, even though it's going to get hit hard when it gets hit. He can locate it well enough, and he's got those secondaries to rely on that he can get around having a bad fastball. You're also going to be comparing BABIP to their career BABIP. So, you know, while kind of 300 is like the accepted kind of median benchmark for BABIP, like, you know, if a guy has a 350 BABIP, he's probably getting unlucky. And if he has a 250 BABIP, he's probably getting lucky, you know. But there are guys who have been able to suppress BABIP throughout their career. I know Clayton Kershaw is one. I don't remember what it is, but I think it was somewhere around like 270 or something like that, career BABIP. So, you know, look at what his BABIP is right now and then what his BABIP is in his career, and just kind of regress to the mean. You know, if his career BABIP is 270 and he's currently at 350 and everything's like, you know, there's no issues there with velocity or anything else like that, I would expect it to regress closer to his career BABIP. And then the last thing with pitchers that I was going to mention too is I like to keep an eye on things to see if someone might be hiding an injury. I look at velocity is the obvious one, right? Like when Robbie Ray in his first start was throwing, you know, a couple miles an hour lower than he was throwing in spring, that was a warning sign. Also, you tend to see walks. So like Justin Verlander in spring, right before he got hurt, I think he gave up like 6 walks in a spring start, which, you know, obviously super uncharacteristic for him. And I think Tristan McKenzie was really struggling with walks early in spring too before he got hurt. So, you know, when guys aren't right physically, things are going to look different. And so velocity, walk rate, and then zone percentage is another one. So if they're not throwing – normally they throw the ball in the zone more, and all of a sudden their zone rate goes from like 50% to 30%. That's another potential indicator of an injury. So those are a couple of things that I like to keep an eye on as well.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to echo everything you just said because I think all of those things are things you should be taking a look at. I'll add on to a few of those things. One, I really like to look at contact rates, like, you know, like, and swing rates inside and outside of the zone. I think that those are really, really important. If a guy's giving up a ton of, you know, zone contact or getting a ton of, you know, generating a ton of swings outside of the zone, I think those are typically things you want to kind of take into account. The other thing is, you know, and this is, I think, harder for probably the average person to do, but watching the games. I mean, like, you know, I think Jack Flaherty, you know, is an example of one, like, if you were watching the game, you saw that it was a really, really poorly called game. Like, you know, now he was erratic at times, but he also, there were a few of those walks shouldn't have been walks. Like, you know, he should have gotten, you know, strike 3 calls on the corner, and the ump kind of squeezed him a little bit. So I think it's important to watch the games, or if you're not able to watch the games yourselves, go to things like you said, Nick's, you know, starting pitcher roundup is fantastic. It's a must read for me every day, because he's watching all of the games. I try to watch as many as I can, but I don't know how he gets through all of them, to be quite honest. He's not watching all to the end.
I don't know how he does.
As soon as the starter's out, he's like moving on to the next one. So there used to be I used to have access to a MLB kind of behind the scenes thing, like through actual Major League Baseball, where I could watch every single pitch within it like just gave you like the pitch and the result of the pitch.
Oh,
and,
okay.
like, you could watch a game in like 35 minutes or 40 minutes, and that's
really nice.
They closed that loophole a couple of years ago, which was a huge bummer for me. I'm not going to say where I got that from, because I don't want to get the person in trouble, but it was really cool.
All right.
especially if you wanted to just watch, like, you know, you want to just watch, like, oh, I want to watch all of Tristan McKenzie's pitches. I could just like play him in a loop real quick and, you know, get through them in 15, 20 minutes, even if you threw 7 innings. So but yeah, what about hitters? Like, what are you looking for with hitters?
Yeah, so with hitters, I actually think it's a little tougher with hitters than pitchers, even because it's tough to tell if it's just a hot streak for hitters or if they've legit changed if they've, you know, made some actual skills growth. Holy shit, Jose Ramirez just hit one and the center fielder missed it, and I think he's going to get an inside the park home run.
Oh, wow. I'm a little bit behind. I've got that game up. I just saw them.
He stopped at third. Oh, man.
I just saw them tie up the game. So bad. I'm a little behind.
Yeah, they're up 9. Guardians are up 9-8 with Jose on third now. Sorry, guys. I'm a Guardians fan, so I got the game on the background here. But anyways, yeah, with hitters, it's tough to tell sometimes because you don't just know if it's a hot streak, because you'll see, guys can have a bunch of barrels and hard hit balls, and like that looks great. And obviously, like you can pick those guys up and play them for the short term, but it doesn't mean that it's like sticky moving forward. Like a guy on a hot streak can look like legit skills growth, but it's not necessarily. So I'm more looking like improvement in K rate is a big thing. Contact rate. Are they making more contacts, and then are they making better contacts? Now, obviously, the hard contact is one of those things. There's also, how's their, max exit velocity look? Exit velocity on fly balls and line drives, their fly ball percentage, their launch angle, their pull rate. And I was going to use Brendan Donovan as an example. So last year, Brendan Donovan was basically just your typical contact hitter. 281. He had 5 homers and 468 at bats. Now you look at the breakdown of what kind of balls he was hitting. He hit 53% ground balls. This year, that's all the way down to 38.5%. He was hitting 23.5% fly balls. This year so far, it's up to 46%. So he's doubled his fly ball rate. And now he's hitting home runs. And so in spring, they mentioned like he had a harder hit ball than he had hit all of last season. His max EV last year was 107. Clearly not a power hitter. This year, he's already hit a ball 109.1 for his max EV. So clearly, there's a clear uptick in power here. This is not just a hot streak. He is trying to hit home runs now. He is, definitely hitting the ball harder. His hard hit rate last year was 37.7%. This year, it's at 53.8%. That'll probably go down. We're way too early for this to be like, okay, his 30.8% barrel rate will certainly go down. But his launch angle is also up. So his launch angle last year was only 6. He's hitting a lot of ground balls. This year it's at 16.5. So, and he's not losing much contact either is the thing. Like he went from 85.5%, he's at 83.5% now. So he's down 2% in his contact rate, and his zone contact rate is even better this year. So, those are the kind of things that I'm looking for in terms of, okay, is this legit skills growth? And for me, it's like flashing lights. Like Donovan is absolutely skills growth. Like this is legit. And then I also earlier I forgot to mention BABIP is another thing. I like to look at their BABIP and then compare it to their career BABIP. Once again, not everybody has the same BABIP. Some guys are going to have a career BABIP closer to like 250. Other guys are going to have BABIPs closer to 350. So 300 is kind of the accepted median, but everybody, depending on how hard they hit the ball, how fast they are, they have different BABIP, I guess, baselines than other guys. So you want to look at where they are compared to where their normal baseline is. So, if their BABIP is 400 and their baseline is like 250, there's probably some regression coming. But those are the things that I'm looking for early season. Even though it's kind of small sample season right now, but, we got to do what we can to try to figure this out, and this is all we can do.
Scott McGuff gave up back-to-back home runs in the bottom of the
ninth. Damn it, McGuff! Come on,
to lose to the Padres, including Ha-Seong Kim with a walk-off home run.
Jesus Christ!
So there is that. Sorry, bud. I'm with you again. For me, like, I'm pretty much right in line with what you're talking about, but like, kind of piggybacking on the Brendan Donovan thing. He made actual changes in the offseason, right? He went to Driveline. He was working on pulling the ball more and trying to elevate and adding power. And so like these are things like, it's one thing to see like a change, but it's another thing to have that change being backed up by like something that they're actually doing, right? A stance change, doing something like Driveline, to try to increase power, pulling the ball more. Like you want to see like, it's great that a guy's hitting for more power, but is it coming with an actual change from an underlying reason? When you see a guy like, Trace Thompson just have a really good game against a really bad, pitcher, like that doesn't move the needle for me. Or like Adam Duvall right now, he's, one of the hottest hitters in baseball. Coming into today, he had 100% zone contact rate. Like that's not sustainable. It's not coming with any sort of change. He's just a streaky guy. But Brendan Donovan, even Nolan Gorman, like there are actual changes to the profile that tell me, hey, maybe this is sustainable. It may not be sustainable. We've seen plenty of times where guys like have just early season success. It looks like it's a sustainable change, and then they go back to being the guy they were. But I'm willing to gamble more on those guys that have had the underlying skill changes that make the surface stat changes look legitimate.
Yep. Yeah. Agree with all of that. And like you said, a storyline is one thing. They said they went to driveline, or they worked on their swing, or they changed their bat. And it's definitely something I mark down, and then I wait to see in season. Okay. I mean, assuming they're available still, but, like you said, are these being backed up by their results? Are they pulling the ball more? Are they hitting the ball harder? And if they are, then you're saying, okay, this was a legit change, and this is a legit skills growth, and that's what we're seeing with Donovan. So, that's why I invest in those guys, because especially when you don't have to pay much. Donovan was pretty damn cheap. You could get him in pretty much the 16th, 17th, 18th, 19th rounds in most drafts, even after all the storylines, like even after everybody kind of knew, and after seeing him hit like 4 homers in spring and all that, you can still get him at a pretty cheap cost. Multi-position eligible, great offense, and we're seeing he's leading off and playing full time now, and looking like a really nice investment.
Yeah, the only bummer for me is that like I was in on him all throughout draft season, and then I didn't get him in my auction in Vegas or my event.
Yeah.
So just a little bit of a bummer for me, but I've got him in a number of other places, so I'm still pretty happy with where I got him. That is going to wrap us up for this episode. Dave, remind everybody where you can reach, and plug if you got anything going on.
You can reach me on Twitter at RunDMcD, and I am just managing my teams, and that's and then doing this podcast with you, Justin. That's pretty much it.
Yep. You can reach me on Twitter at Justin Mason FWFB. Email me the show, friendsoffantasybenefits@gmail.com. I'm writing daily at Fangraphs. I'm writing 3 days a week for Fantasy Pros. I'm on this podcast, Sleeper on this Bus podcast, and TGFBI podcast. That will do it for this episode. For Dave and myself, thank you for listening. Have a fantastic baseball offseason, or actual season.